Hi guys, Christy here from Just Saying. Let's make another Christmas card. Today we're using some old or whatever designer series paper. It is in Cherry Cobbler, and the coordinating ink for that. I say old, but it's pretty much just a basic pattern will work to be substituted for this one, along with the theme of the Christmas card. So Cherry Cobbler for the paper and Cherry Cobbler ink for the coloring. And I'm moving that one aside. I'm using the stamp set White Christmas. This piece here is one stamp that I'm using, and then the banner of Merry Christmas to go between the trees. So I'm going to show you how I've set this card up. It's fairly simple once you get your placement and measurements in. I've got this piece of the designer series paper to be 1.5 by 4 to do the width of the first layer of the card. I'm using the Stampin Up heavyweight or 100-pound base layer, and then for the stamping and coloring and the designer series paper, this is the 80-pound paper, so a bit thinner, and that's going to be popped up with some dimensionals. Designer series paper, a non-Stampin' Up product of just I think this is 1/8 of an inch white satin ribbon from Michaels, but any coordinating ribbon, baker's twine would work for this. So let's get started with the stamping. This White Christmas stamp set is photopolymer, and here it is here. You're supposed to be able to see through it. It's black, that's fine, I can still see that. But with this one I found that I do need my paper piercing mat to be underneath the cardstock, just to give that little bit of a cushion. I'm going to stamp the images first in basic black archival ink. Any of the blacks would work for this. Inking it up really well. I found though that the middle of this needs to be pushed down into the ink pad. So that's what I'm doing, and I'm just going to line up from where I've got my stamp on the block, lining up the top of the block with the top of the card. Firm and even pressure down, getting good coverage, and then straight back up, and that will go to the side. Next I've got the Merry Christmas banner, and this one I may have to get my head into the frame just to try to line up the trees. So I'm going to do down here between the two trunks of the trees, hopefully lining up the banners with the trunks, straight down, straight up. Good. And there's two little birds. Can you see the stamp set here? There they are. Okay, two little birds that I have mounted on one of the blocks, the B block, and before creating these cards, I placed the birds. This is my backwards way of thinking. First I mounted the Merry Christmas, and then I took the birds individually and I put them on the top of the Merry Christmas banner, and then I put the block on the birds. That gives me a good, it lines them up just perfectly, I think. That's how it works for me, instead of having to try to line them up after the fact. So I'm just going to ink those up, get their little feet lined up on the banner. Sorry if my head gets in the way there. It's quite a little stamp. Okay, so now I've got some coloring to do. I'm going to use the Cherry Cobbler ink pad, and if you're not familiar with this, when the inks are closed, Stampin' Up has designed them so that the ink stays at the top or upside down for storage. So you can literally just squeeze the bottom with the pad, and then you get your palette, push there, pull and rotate, and this can become your palette of color, where you can use a water pen, a blender pen, or paintbrush if you wanted. I'm just going to try to get a little bit of ink and just put it on my birds. Now this is not watercolor paper, so I want to take as few trips over the paper as possible or I'll end up with some bumps. So just quickly filling in my birds, and then the banner just on the one side. I'm kind of just doing like pull down and drag of the color along the one side, giving the same effect on each. And Cherry Cobbler is quite bright and, well, bright and dark at the same time. So I don't want the ink to be too dark as I'm going over the letters and covering the actual letters of Merry Christmas. But that's the done. That's the done. That's the letters done. To clean this, I'm just going to wipe it on a piece of scratch paper and clean it off the tip for next time I use it. Put that away, or I have a mess. I'm going to adhere the designer series paper to the front of the card. And sometimes when you cut paper and cardstock, they don't always match up. Even if you did want to make it the same size, something happens and it doesn't quite match up. So I'm just gently putting down the paper and seeing that I've got like a 32th of an inch difference. I don't know how to say 1/32. So I just line it up and make sure that it's fairly symmetrical and then adhere it. Alright, next on from my glue dots, I'm going to just take the glue dot on one end and the same side, other end. Take off my glue dots, and these are going across the ribbon. I've already pre-cut these. I've made 12 of these cards, or this will be my 12th. So I, in mass production, created all of the layers, created all the designer series paper sizing, and trimmed all my ribbon. My initial card that I made actually had a bow attached. Here it is. Had a little bow that I attached, and then I glue dotted it to the back. But after cutting out the next 11 strips of ribbon, I ran out of ribbon. So they don't have bows, which is fine, I think. I'm going to pop this one up. Normally I would do just 5 dimensionals on the back, but for some reason my brain thinks that this one needs extra support on the side, and maybe it's because there's not much in the front of it that I feel like it might sag, or so that's the complete opposite though. The more there is, the more it'll sag. So most times I would just do 5, 1 in each corner and 1 in the middle. But this one, for some reason, I just feel like it needs that side support. So now that I've got my dimensionals on, I'm finding my Whisper White here and removing the backings. Something that I do. I have to count my dimensionals as I remove them. Lining it up, because this is the first layer. This ultimately is 5 1/4 by 4 on a 5 1/2 by 4 1/4 side folding card. So there we are. That's the next card in my Christmas card series. Tune in next week. I'll have another one for you, and I wish you a great week.